welcome to the event. I see that people get connected. Hello, hello, welcome from Prague. For those who just joined, you can feel free. If you want, you can put on your camera and to unmute yourself if you want to say hello. Pleasure to meet you. I see there's Dan. Hello, Dan. Thanks for sharing your video. Hello. Good, good. Nice to see you. All right, so people get connected. There are some more people in the waiting room, so they are all joining. Good, so everyone gets connected. For those who just joined, if you still need this 1 more minute to get your drinks, some snacks, any supplies to get ready for the event, kind of a last call, feel free to grab that, and then we can kick it off in a moment. All right, so welcome. You didn't miss anything yet. We just start. So if you want, you can also put into the chat from where you are dialing in. I see we have some people do that already. Hello, Hannelore, nice to meet you from London. Hello, we have New York City, perfect. Who else is with us? Cayman, London, Zurich. All right, Istanbul, Beirut. All right, good. I see quite a nice mixed group. Perfect. Nice to meet you from Berlin. All right, so for those who just joined, feel free to put into the chat where you are from. So it's a pleasure to have you all virtually to visit Prague. Also, maybe a good comment in the beginning. The event is recorded. Also for those members who are not able to make it, of course, it will be not shared outside the community. So just that you are aware. All right, good. So welcome. Perfect. So I see we have 8:02 local time here in Prague. Some people are getting connected right now. Good, I see there's a lot of interest. I'm very happy to have such a big group. So it's very nice to see that there are so many people being interested in what are the night watchmen and what they are doing. All right, so good. I'm just checking where we are in terms of the amount of people. We are at 25 at the moment, good. So maybe I can give you a brief introduction already. Meanwhile, we wait for some more people to join so you don't get punished for being in time. So my pleasure. My name is David. I will be your host today. Originally, I am from Germany, as some of you are. I've seen that here in the chat. So nice to meet you all. I'm in Prague since 11 years by now, in the Czech Republic. Just to explain to you, you're probably very familiar by now with Zoom, but in case you're not, so you have the chance to always put anything into the chat. So feel free if you have any questions. You can also unmute yourself during the event. Happy to take also live questions verbally, or you just put things into the chat. So from time to time, I will also monitor it there. So you can use that. And I would like to also introduce to you that we have some reactions. So the Zoom also has some reactions, which looks like that. If you give a thumbs up, so you see on my left-hand corner on the video right now, the thumbs up. So I would like to ask all of you to give me a thumbs up if you have been to Prague. Who of you was already here? You can use the reactions there. Thanks. I see Tulpar and Annika, Hannelore and Linda. Perfect. So many people. All right, good. So perfect. So I hope I can refresh your memories. And for those who haven't been here, do not worry. I hope I can give you a glimpse of the city until we can all travel again. So welcome to A Small World, the Night Watchman of Prague. My name is David. I will host the event for the next hour for you. And as mentioned, originally I'm from Germany, but I live here because of my Czech wife, Lucy, and our baby boy. Over the day, I'm a coach, so I have different things I do. First, I'm a coach. I do support people in times of crisis. I give workshops and team building activities and team coaching for big corporational organizations, and also some life coaching for individuals. And so I support people who want to get the best out of times of crisis and to get the challenges done. But also in the evening, I share my passion. So you're not in the wrong event, don't worry. In the evening, I follow my passion. So I love to do in life what I'm passionate about. And I like the history and the medieval history particularly. And I always do some events in the old town of Prague, but I'm not alone. We are a group of 11 people by now. I started to work as a night watchman 6 years ago. That was a medieval tour, or is a medieval tour, that shows the most important historical highlights and events of Prague. By now, I'm no more alone. We are this group of 11, and I can also share with you how that looks like, because it's quite interesting to see that. So you should be able to see a picture coming up right now. As you see, we take the medieval times quite serious, or to be honest, 17th and 18th century. So we always represent forgotten heroes. And for us, night watchmen belong to that. So when we talk about night watchmen, they were always part of our European history, a jewel, but we forgot about that. You know already the thumbs up in the reactions. Can I ask you, who of you did already some night watchman tour in any city in the world? Anyone who did some night watchman tour? Can I see some thumbs up there? I see, Maite did that. Thanks for sharing, Maite. So Maite, you're the only one. Imagine, you're the only one who did that. But of course, you're not alone. I also did a few in other cities. Just to share a bit with you what we are normally doing, we are doing the tours in the city, and we did that in the in-person tours until March last year. Our second tour was our Plague Doctor of Prague. We wrote 3 years ago, and we moved that all online. Since March last year, we can't do any tours in the city. And of course, we do that through a video. I will share that with you, but there's no audio recorded. That means we can stay engaged the whole time and also to answer all your questions you have. And in case you don't have questions, don't worry. I have questions. I'm always a very curious person, so I hope you don't mind. So from time to time, I might ask you something. So feel always free to unmute yourself. So that's us in the team, quite a diverse group. And we do also now these online versions. I will also share my video that you can see that, and then we can kick it off. All right, so you should be able to see now coming up a lantern, which is a typical symbol of night watchman. So I will explore with you a bit about the duties of this forgotten history, this forgotten work, duty, and also at the same time I show you around in the old town of Prague. We shot a movie in March last year in the abandoned city, so we do not see many people. A bit in the beginning, but then we go into the evening hours. So that's what we always do in the city. All right, with that, I would kick it off. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can put it also into the chat. I will check it from time to time, so nothing gets lost. If there's a lot of questions, happy to also answer them afterwards. So I'm quite flexible. All right, so just to give you a brief start here, like a brief intro. Prague is, of course, a beautiful city. When we go back through the different centuries, it was always pretty well preserved. Prague was not really destroyed in war times. We also follow a map that shows us where we virtually walk today. And we kick it off in front of the famous Powder Gate, which is one of the 13 gates going all around the city. And of course, it was there as a defense tower to protect the city from the outside enemies, and for the watchmen on top, looking always after the fire. Night watchmen were always walking inside the city, and this is what I do with my colleagues. Every hour, they used to shout the time, every full hour, that people know that the city is protected. A city in the past that was quiet was very suspicious. You would have always watchmen and night watchmen shouting. They would take care of the shady characters, the purse cuts, the cutthroats, and the villains, and adulterers, and politicians, but they were not so dangerous, to be honest. No one was allowed to walk around in the evening hours, also not in Prague. You have to imagine the first city light we had in Paris, that was around 1757, followed by Londinium, London, and then only in Prague, so very late. The city gates, like the big gate you can see here, or the entrance, would be closed. Only people like watchmen with their halberd would walk around, the typical weapon, which I just have on my live video just behind me in the corner right now. It catches some dust, I have to say, with a sad eye. But this is what we do. We have this huge big halberd, which is taller than us because it's more than 2 meters. And we use that, of course. We are not allowed to kill people with that, but of course it is for respect. In the past, night watchman, that was an official position of the town hall, but not a good reputation. Below the night watchman is just the executioner and the gravedigger. So therefore it's quite exceptional that this is quite an important job, but very unliked. So people did not like them. They used to work in the night, and God used to say, you should work during the day and not in the night. That was one of the reasons. And they were themselves quite shady characters. So that's a bit about an intro of the duty, but we will talk, of course, more about them. I always represent officially the city of Prague and the Czech Republic in the Guild of Night Watchmen. Of course, another duty was to take care of people who were purse cuts. We bring them into the jail rooms below the town hall. We will also visit the old town hall of Prague. I just mentioned the important duty of this guild, so it's still existing today, and I meet once per year, except of course this and the last year, but we normally meet every year to see each other. 160 night watchmen of 6 different countries, keeping this tradition alive. The main purpose though was to watch the fire, and that's why we have the horn, which is also on the symbol of the Guild of Night Watchmen. The horn is just behind me. It's quite long, actually. I can get that, but you can see that. So the horn was used to warn people. Of course, it was only used when there was fire, though. So people knew what to do. That's why it's quite a big, huge horn, and I can't do that at home here. I used to do it in the online tour even, at least in the last year. So I got some problems with my neighbors, so I can't do that anymore. So it's very loud. So that was to warn people of fire, the biggest enemy, since most of the houses were made of wood, and you find in each house always an open fire for cooking purposes and for heating, of course. That was just an introduction. Now we go to the Old Town. I will show you some famous sites like the Old Town Square, and later on also these towers as you see here, but also later on the Charles Bridge, very famous. Kamení most, as the Czech people call it, the first stone bridge where we end our tour. Do you already have some questions? Something you would like to know? Anything that comes to your mind? All good? All right. So in case you do not have questions, I will also check the chat if I missed anything there. Just a second, give me a moment that I can see the chat. All right. So in case you don't have a question, I would like to ask you one thing. So for those people who were in Prague, there were a few of them. I would love to ask you, if there's one thing you remember from Prague, what would that be? Is there anyone who would like to share that with me? What do you remember from Prague?
This is Maite. I think the bridge, I love the bridge with the statues on the sides. And I also liked very much, I can't remember the name, but there's like a cobblestone street that goes up towards the top of the hill, or I don't know which side of the city it's after the bridge. And there's some nice, the castle, the cafes. So that area was very nice. And yeah, that's what I remember.
Yes, thanks so much for sharing, Maite. The castle district was the first part of Prague, called originally Praha, and that means the doorstep into a new world. It was around the 9th century when Libusche had a vision. That was a lady who owned the country here, and from this side of the river, she has seen on the other side a huge big hill, and she envisioned a castle there. And there's a very famous path going up there, the one you described just, Maite, and there was built then a big, huge castle called Praha. That means a doorstep into a new world. Just to let you know a bit, it's not a legend, it's actually city history. But there were even earlier settlements. But the oldest part you find on the other side, indeed. Even this part where we walk here, lots of monuments are from the 14th up to the 17th century. So I will give you also some idea about the architecture, of course. Thanks for sharing, Maite. Anyone else? What else do you remember? Or anyone else to remember anything from Prague? Anything? If not, do not worry. So, of course, we will show you a bit more of that. We go now to one of the marketplaces. We have 6 marketplaces. Everything is quite in order. It depends who you are, the people used to say in the past. Today, we mainly go back into the 17th century in our event, because that a little bit of time travel, because there was the most important historical events. But even earlier, we had marketplaces here as of the 12th century, like this one here. This one is from the 12th century, this old place which we approach now. Today, there's not much happening anymore, even in the busy times in Prague. This is quite a forgotten spot. It's known as Ovocný trh. In case someone is a Czech speaker, you will be able to and also Russian speaker, because it's very similar. Ovocný trh means fruit market. For those people who do not know Czech language, it's kind of a tongue breaker. Trh has no vowels at all, so it's one of the nice words I can share with you as a tongue breaker if you want. Ovocný trh. Not only the fruits they had here, but also even the vegetables. So vegetables were also quite often here sold. And it was for common people. The people used to say, tell me who you are, and I tell you what you can buy. Or also tell me where you are, where you live, and I tell you who you are. Often you can see that there are a lot of interesting people who are living in the old town who are quite rich. Of course, when we talk about the poor area, that was around, means at the city walls and also at the riverside. You have to imagine people used to throw the garbage always into the river. I just stopped here the video for a moment to introduce the square. Market Square here for the fruits and vegetables was for common people who could afford that, local fruits and vegetables. And when we talk about that, of course, we know that it was some things like cabbage for the cabbage soups. They used to cook them all in the rooms here all around. So therefore, it was quite a stinky place, to be honest. It did not smell so good. Garbage was thrown out of the windows. That was pretty common, but not only in Prague, everywhere in Europe, of course. Often the people used to go here to look also for the ingredients, everything for the liquid bread. Any idea? Again, you can put that into the chat. What do you think was liquid bread? Any idea? What is the liquid bread? And I will check meanwhile some of the questions you mentioned here. Of course, I will also comment on those. Yeah, there's something about the Opera House. We will see one of them. It's close by here. Very good indeed. So yeah, so when we talk about Dan, thanks for the question about the authority. So meanwhile, you can use the chat for the liquid bread. Just to answer your question, Dan. So it was an authority indeed, but again, a very low reputation. Night watchman was kind of a caste system. You were born as a night watchman's son. That means you have to become by default a night watchman, which is kind of interesting. So there was no way to escape. You have to stay in that. Of course, it was a duty for males, so for men only. But if you are born as a daughter of a night watchman, or for example, as an executioner's daughter, you would have to wait until someone from the same level of that class would show up for a wedding. If there's no one coming, you remain alone. And for watchmen, night watchmen, but also the executioners, you have to do what the father is doing. You start to get into the job as soon as you are 12 years old, and then you have to work it alone when you're adult. You are adult when you are 15 years old until the 18th century here, just to let you know. All right, so I see a lot of beer there. Very good, indeed. So thanks for sharing in the chat, Christopher and NT and Amanda. Indeed, beer, that's a bullseye. But it's a very different fermentation process. English people used to call it liquid bread because it was there to replace a meal. You drink it warm and thick. Often. And by the way, quite a lot, 3 liters per day you should drink. If you are in Prague and you drink a beer before 10 o'clock in the morning, people might look weird at you, but anything after 10 o'clock in the morning, that is fine. People do not look at you. That's quite common that you can do. So therefore, beer is still known in Prague to be very, you can buy that any time of the day. 3 liters though was a different fermentation process and means also a cooking process involved, means much less alcohol. So therefore people used to drink it, but they would not get as drunk as nowadays with 3 liters. So don't be afraid of that. Even for children, it was recommended. Beer had a better quality often than water, and it was even cheaper. If you come to Prague still nowadays, you will find lots of pubs where you find half liter of beer being cheaper than half liter of Coke or any other soft drink. So that did not change much. Still very low taxation on the beer. Of course, if you want to know more about the beer, happy to answer more questions or anything about any recommendations, of course, happy to do that. So that's a bit about the place here, the marketplace of the Ovocny. Sometimes it was used for spices, but normally those were fine goods brought up to the castle. They had the marketplace there for the fine nobles. Here, sometimes very rare if there was leftovers, they used to sell that here. Sometimes even pepper. And pepper was a very good payment method, by the way. So pepper was one of the very good spices you could get here in Prague, coming, of course, over different trading routes here to Prague. You might know the English word money bags. For those who are German speaking here, Pfeffersack, you would translate that. That would mean in English a pepper bag. So those are the money bags. They also used to call them here. Those were people who were so rich that they could afford having pepper, and they used to pay with that. You could even buy the homestead and your house with pepper. So a very good way. There was only one thing that was more expensive than pepper, and that was sugar until the 18th century. And then sugar came from you know, from the sugar cane from a lot of areas, and it was not so important anymore. But sugar was very expensive, even more expensive than salt quite often, just to let you know. Give me 10 pounds of sugar and I give you a horse. And a horse is like one of the metal horses in your time. So like the metal horses, like the witchcraft. You mentioned the opera in the chat. So this part we see here in front of us is not the National Opera, the National Theatre, but it belongs to that. It's a small chain today. But this theatre has a long old history. It is known as the Estates Theatre. Very old, lots of interesting plays they do here, often operas indeed, sometimes classical concerts, and we had also some famous events here. It was in the 18th century when we had the first world premiere of Don Giovanni. So that was quite important in 1786. So quite important. Don Giovanni was not played the first time in Salzburg, not anywhere in Vienna, but here in Prague. It was, of course, Mozart who came over to do that. A person that was not so famous, but is famous today, came in the year 1834. His name was Joseph Cajetan Till. This is how you would translate that. He had a play here called Fidlovačka, that is a play with the violins, so very nice. The play itself was not so good, but his own compositions, his own music was brilliant. And there was one song that was called Gde domov mój, which means, where is my home, or where is my homeland? After that song, there was a hurricane of applause for 4 minutes and standing ovation, so much longer than the song itself. And since that day, it's the Czech national anthem, the Czech national hymn, so born over here. So if you come to Prague and you go to a Czech pub, you can impress the Czech people by drinking 3 liters of beer, and you can share with them where the hymn was born. Often some Czech people don't know that, so it's here. If you still remember that story after 3 liters of beer, of course. Today, you still find lots of plays there, and they keep playing Don Giovanni almost every year. Of course, there are exceptions this year and in the last year, but Don Giovanni, even in war times, they played it. So very rare that they skip it. And it still looks the same as in the past, the times of Don Giovanni and Mozart. That's why it's so famous. Back to our night watchman. He would walk around, shouting the time, also not alone. There would be 6 to 7 night watchmen at the same time walking around the city, often echoing or kind of talking to each other, shouting to each other, even though they could not see them. Sometimes they were singing songs or even poems. I will have one for you at the end, of course. And here we are at the University of Carolina, which is not about any Carolina, it's Latin, and it means Universitas Carolina. It is genitive, third case of Latin, and it means that it's the Charles University. We had the first Middle European university here. And it's still active, of course. We have more than 14 or around 14 or 15 faculties all around in the old town spread. And this one here is the place that was built the first time, of course, reconstructed by now, and they do exhibitions here, and sometimes the ceremony for those who achieve their diplomas. And now we go to the area of the old town. We will stop by shortly at one kind of a ghost. Prague has lots of interesting ghost and legend stories, but it's more about a memorial or a memory to the Don Giovanni, so we will pay him a visit. Are there any other questions? Anything else you would like to know? All good. So I'm just checking if there's anything in the chat right now. Good. Does not seem so. All right. So some people have some experience and went to the opera. That's nice. It's a beautiful acoustic, and it's really small, and it feels like you're really there in the 18th century. I know we have some people also from the US here in our event. So just to let you know, we also like to share always this one because it's quite old. Often our private groups, when we do the in-person tours from New York or from other cities in the US, they like to make the pictures of this famous balcony because it's a bit older than America. So that's from the 14th century, so very old. So it's very nice, and it's still original. So they did never do any reconstruction on this one. This is the way how the whole building looked like of the Charles University. All right, good. The person around here, so the person behind the corner, is this Don Giovanni, so we will pay him a visit. We always tell the people to be quiet when we walk around. We share a bit of these ghosts and legends from time to time. But here you can find this statue, you will see in a moment, that is also the same as in Salzburg. So we have that in 2 spots in Europe, where Mozart is from and where he had his first play. Reminds us of a ghost. Some people call it a Nazgul. Some crazy bachelor parties try to stick their head into that almost every year, I can tell you. So it's kind of, yeah, they are quite often in the news here. And this statue reminds us this first play. Il Commendatore, that is the statue. That's one of the characters in the beginning who gets killed. And he returns at the end of the play of Don Giovanni to have his revenge. So that's why he looks like a ghost. Our next stop is at the Old Town Square, which is beautiful. And you will see it's getting slowly dark. We always walk into the sunset. So by the time we are at the Charles Bridge, it will be very dark. We shot this movie in March, as mentioned last year. It was around 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So only people who had urgent work to do were allowed to walk here. And kind of interesting, I like to share that from time to time. We were even stopped twice by the police, even 3 times, when we shot the movies here, because we were not allowed to walk around, but we had a permission. And thanks to that, we could do that. As you can also imagine, we belong to, it's around 10% of people in Prague living from tourism, and from one day to the other, there was no income anymore. And therefore we could prove that we could, do that for work purposes. So we are very grateful to have this online version. Of course, it doesn't replace you traveling and us doing a tour, but you miss traveling, we miss doing tours. So I think it's a perfect match. We jump into the Old Town Square here, a famous place. It was there for meat. People used to go here to buy meat, of course. That was quite normal. It was for rich people who could afford that, Old Town Square. I have to say that most of the buildings are here from the 14th up to the 18th century, so it's a beautiful mix. And normally this place is really crowded, especially at some prime time like 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. It would be full of people, always approaching the buildings, a lot of stands and shops here around, open almost until the late night. I would like to introduce you to some building in specifically, because here you find buildings that have really a rich history. When we talk about this place, as it was a marketplace, but it was also used for the executions. It was pretty common that people would go here to the town hall, they get sentenced in the town hall, and below was directly the jail. So the jail rooms were in the past in Europe always below the town hall. And in some really old ones, you can still find in the catacombs, in the basements, these old cells, like here. So we get a bit closer now to see a bit more. Overall, the buildings are here. Some of them are 17th century, as mentioned, 16th century. You have very different architecture style of Renaissance, Baroque, and even Gothic. That is the church in front of us there. It is known as the Tin Church, which is really old, from the year 1368. I will show it to you more in detail in a moment when we get closer there. Prague has more than 100 churches, so it's kind of interesting. And with the population in Prague of 1.2 million, and more than 70% are atheists without any religion. Kind of interesting. And that's why the churches are all empty for the tourists. You find often lots of classical concerts inside. So if you come to Prague, and even though you might not be so much into classic, it's still a great acoustic and the churches look beautiful. So I can really recommend to get a ticket there. And now we get a bit closer to the town hall. It has some famous monument. Yeah. The pickpockets. Oh yeah, Harvey, thanks for asking. So it's about the situation with pickpockets these days. So, or before the virus, of course, yes. So that's, I think, if there's really a danger in Prague, then it is the pickpockets. So they are quite busy, especially on certain areas of metros, the subways. But of course, they're also gone at the moment since there are no tourists. So that's maybe the only thing to take care of. And a bit the taxi drivers. Yeah, there can be also a bit of pickpocketing approaches. Yeah. But overall, Prague is pretty safe. Also, if you travel alone, Prague is pretty good to travel here. What you see here is the astronomical church. So that's quite a famous monument. It is from the 15th century, built by famous architects of Jan Schindel and Master Cardan. There are two blue doors on the top. They would always open every full hour, and you can see the 12 apostles walking by. A mechanism made of wood, so it's without, of course, any electricity, and it's not the oldest astronomical clock you can find in Europe, but the oldest one that is still existing. So therefore, it was always quite famous. They even used to play it now here, or they still do it, even in the times of our crisis at the moment, and also last year. But it's nice because it gives hope to the few people who are here in the city. Normally, you would find also lots of people here walking around from the Czech people, of course, but no one is living inside the old town. Most of us, we live outside. Just a few celebrities live here. The whole buildings you see here, they're all connected to the town hall. So under each different governments of the past in the different centuries, they often, and the politicians working there, they always extended it to make it bigger with their private rooms inside, of course, or next to it. And that's on the other side where you find hotels and cafes nowadays. And often the buildings are really original from the old 16th and 17th century. Just the outside has been with more layers reconstructed, of course, but it's still otherwise quite original. You might know, or you might have heard, there are even some underground tours. So to be honest, it's a competition, but not really. We like to refer to other tours. There's a lot of good competition in Prague. So whenever you come to Prague, there's even an underground tour that shows even the old catacombs here of the J room, just to let you know. It was Nightwatchmen who used to bring them there in the night times. So as mentioned, we were not allowed to kill people, but there was a certain respect. Disrespect from the population living there, but respect from these shady characters, since it was a reinforcement or an enforcement of a law. So that means we had the authority to put people into prison, not to kill as mentioned, but to put them into prison. Otherwise, in the prison, of course, you would have people also waiting for the executions that used to happen always here. So a marketplace at the old town hall, old town squares in the cities were often used for that purpose, for public executions. And that was, by the way, a family getaway. So just imagine you would come here with your family members from the outside. It is a big event. It's very nice for the adults to have fun, to have joy, and to have fun. Medieval entertainment over the past centuries. For the children, they would bring them along, of course. That's for educational purposes, to show what happens when you go the wrong way. And some executions were really famous. For example, that led to some specific events in Prague, like even 30 years of war. You might have heard about the famous 30 years of war in Europe, and it all started here. And there we go now. Every year, still Czech people put their flowers almost throughout the whole year to remind those forgotten heroes. You can see there are some marks in the ground here, in the pavement. Also a date, so I will share that also with you. We dive a bit into the 17th century. You can see there the year of 1621. But first, I need to start a bit earlier. In the year 1618, it was almost all the time Czech Protestants in that time who tried to claim better rights. Just to stop the video for a moment. It was the Protestants who tried to find better ways to also pray their version of the Bible and to get better rights on this side of the river. On the other side, you would find the Habsburgers, the Germans and the Austrians living in their fine castle area, connected all with very, very close to Vienna. And here on this side, the Czech people, also the Czech nobility, Bohemian nobles also, but often lots of common people. And they struggled, especially in the times of starvation. There was hunger. There was not enough food for the people here. Meanwhile, on the other side, they had servants, horses, everything they wanted. So they claimed rights. And also they tried to have a better say within the religion, because often people had to pay a lot for their indulgence. Not as much as in the 14th century, but still quite to pay a lot of taxes for the Catholic Church. You see here the date, 21st of June, 1620. LP means that's after Christ, but it also has an important battle before. In 1618, the Czech people went to the castle, on the other side of the river, to the town hall there of the fine nobles, and they did something that is called a defenestration. Do you have any idea what a defenestration could be. Feel free to unmute yourself and share, or you can put it also into the chat. What do you think? What is a defenestration? For those people who speak Latin and for those people who speak French, you might have an advantage here.
La finestra.
Any idea? I hear some.
Finestra.
Yeah, I hear some discussion. Yeah, you are getting there. You want to share? I will also check the chat. So yes, what's that?
Something to do with the windows, but
yeah, indeed, fenestre is the window. Yeah, very good, mate. Indeed, yes. So when we talk about good, so it's a very good comment here. So when we talk about windows, throughout the windows, to throw someone out of the windows, indeed, throwing someone off the window, very good, indeed. So you have that very nicely said here, indeed. So that's about the defenestration, means from the window. This is what they used to do 3 times in history, by the way, so it always worked quite well. If they were unhappy with the town councils there, they used to go there doing that, the defenestration. And those people in that time survived the fall, but it was still considered as one of the most important reasons for the beginning of the 30 years of war, with a lot of wasted lives, and not forget the plague that came along with those days. So very difficult times. In Prague, the war did not last for 30 years. It ended after 2 years with a famous battle called the Battle of the White Mountain. In the year 1620, in that battle, almost 7,000 Czech people were killed, slaughtered by the imperial forces. They had no chance against the Catholics. And it was also one of the shortest battles in history worldwide. It took them only 2.5 hours until 7,000 people were dead. And then it wasn't over. They took the 27 leaders into the jail and they gave them the chance to go to the better religion, to become Catholic, but they remained Protestant. And that's why they were killed. That's why they were executed here. And that was the Day of Blood, 21st of June, 1621. On the right side, you see 2 swords, same as on the left one, the executioner swords. The famous executioner, the master executioner, Jan Middelarge. Jan Middelarge came here to execute 27 people, 24 by chopping off their heads. They had a noble title, and 3 people on the gallows because they had no religion and they had no title. So they were going to the death of poor people, to the gallows. But still today, 27 crosses remind us that time that happened here. And it was mandatory for Czech people to see it. And it was not for fun, that execution. It was to turn them all to become Catholic. They had a lot of sympathy for them because it was famous people. Just to give an example, the rector of the Charles University was one of those 27 here, Jan Jasinski. So known people and peaceful people. Of course, there were people who were also before there. So it did not start just with Protestants. There were always other people also Hussites. So we go to someone who also was a quite famous hero. Oh, the building here is a city building. It's quite nice to see, but below we had the gallows, and just a few people even know that in the Czech Republic. And that was really for common people. So the gallows, and every second weekend you find here public executions in the past, because it was a good income for the city. As I mentioned, people came from the countryside, lots of food all around here. They even sold souvenirs. So just to let you know, a public execution was always a very good income for cities even. Yeah, I know, Laura, thanks for sharing. The square is quite beautiful here. So indeed, so it's really old, and we would be always distracted. So it would be always lots of people here normally. So it's very exceptional. I would love to introduce to you to Jan Hus, a famous hero of the Czech people, often not known in Europe. So he's quite important for them. But before that, you can see quite nicely here the church, just to spend a few minutes on that. Because it's known as this tin church, built in the year 1368, this is what Czech people really call old. Built by a famous king, king and his architect. That was Peter Parler, that was the architect of Charles IV, so the personal architect of the king. I like to compare him with Peter Parker because everyone knows Spider-Man. So Peter Parler is just one letter difference. He built the nice church there, the Charles University, but also the Charles Bridge. So he built even more monuments, but those are the most important. For those of people who have been to Germany, and I know we have some people from Germany here, so in case you have been to Cologne, they have the Cathedral of Cologne there, a huge big monument. That was built by his father. So Heinrich Paler or Henry Paler was the architect who built the Cathedral of Cologne, and his son built the monuments over here. So a famous family. But if you build a house, don't ask the Paler family. Not only that it costs a fortune, but also it takes ages to finish that. They never finish that in lifetimes. We walk around here, this monument of Jan Hus. So that was a famous leader. That dates back to 14th and 15th century. Hus started as a priest, and he prayed the Bible in his own version with his followers called Hussites because of his name. A very peaceful leader, also to fight the indulgence, the money you pay to get your spot in heaven, especially in that time. It was the Catholic authorities who got lots of money from the people going into the church, asking for forgiveness and mercy by paying off for their sins. And he did not like that. He also prayed the Bible in the mother tongue, in the Czech language, and that was very rare. You have to imagine everything was in Latin. For one reason, because no one understood any word. So imagine you go your whole life to the church, you never understand the word of God. What you understand is what you should, the interpretation of the priests after that. And they were very creative and very clever. They used to say that everyone can go to heaven, also you. You just have to pay for that. This is what they said. He did not like that. And people, for the first time, they also learned that they don't have to pay anything. They learned that in their own language, of course. So that's why they liked him a lot, and they understood they just have to behave in order to get to heaven. It ended quite in a bit of a tragedy for him because his followers became violent. He could not stop them anymore, and that's why violence spread around in Prague. The king of Bavaria, who supported him in that time, could not support him anymore with the violence here in Prague happening, and therefore he had to stop. And then Hus was invited to go to Constance, a city in Germany, to discuss there, but it was a trap. On his way, they burned already his followers at the stake here, and then he was imprisoned in Constance for 1 year and then burned as an arch-heretic in the flames. So therefore, that happened to Jan Hus, but still Czech people consider him as the first reformer. Not only he, they, but also the historians often say that Martin Luther came and he managed the Reformation, but Jan Hus already tried it earlier. He just did not manage it. Also, Jan Hus had his thesis 100 years before Luther, trying to fight peacefully against the Catholic Church with education and translating Bible and putting the thesis on the Charles Bridge, but also on the monument of the town hall. Even Martin Luther said later on, we were all Hussites, we just didn't know. This is what he said. Or likely in the Old English way, he said, all Hussites we were, we just knew not. But I can't talk like that, even though I like Shakespeare a lot. Once we got a review, we had our English tour in the Old English language before. That was quite difficult to learn, to study for that, of course, with a native English speaker in our group, but it was a challenge. But often we got reviews, very nice tour, but very poor English. So we had to change it back. There are no do's and don'ts in a very different language. So people did not get used to that. So we changed it again to the common English. The church you see here is the St. Nicholas Church. We have 3 of them because we have more than 100 churches, hence the names are repeating here. And from here we have a last view walking around, so looking also around, and then we get to the area of the riverside. So there we of course share a bit. There's a bit of jumping there because it's not a nice way to walk, and that's why we jump a bit like witchcraft into the area of the riverside. And then we get to our Charles Bridge, very famous. Any other questions? Meanwhile, we jump in a moment to the castle side, the riverside. Any other comments or questions? All right. I see there's a message a little bit longer. Christopher, I will check that in a while, so I will do that in a moment. All right, so where we are, Riverside, already getting more and more dark. Just some famous monument on the right-hand side here of us, which is known as the Rudolfinum. And that is a monument where you find, it was always built for a classical concert, so always for music. And you have the Prague Spring Festival of classical music, always here in Prague. And they used to always do that every year. Of course, again, they can't do that now, but they even had an online version this year. So last year. So therefore, it's quite famous for classic also. It is not as old as it looks. It's from the 18th century, end of the 18th century. So built quite a long time up into the 19th. So the Rudolfinum. Lots of statues on top, often lots of musicians representing the music always. And for compositions, of course, a lot of classic art and classic music. The riverside is beautiful, of course, where we go now. It's because it's very empty, and it's even in our in-person tour, we usually go to some hidden gems. We go, of course, to the Old Town Square. Lots of things happen there, but we even go to the riverside because it's a very beautiful view on the castle, the Charles Bridge, and there's not as many people as in the Old Town itself or the castle district. I have also one thing I did not share in the beginning. So usually our tour is designed for an hour. I would also love to give you a bit of a premiere today. So which is to show you a very small documentation we just did. It's the draft version. It's a premiere for me to share that. I would love to do that within this group to share with you a small document, which is our contribution to the Prague Film Festival. So it's not a complete document yet. So it's just a 5 minutes thing. So I would like to share that, where we interviewed the colleagues of mine about the duty of night watchman, how they feel about that, what is their most important experience or interesting experience in the city, but also what they have learned from our difficult year last year. So it's kind of an interesting video. I would love to share that with you at the end. So if we still have the time, so I hope we will have that. All right, just check if there's anything. All right. Okay. So that was just a comment. Okay, I will read that then in a while. Thank you, Christopher. Indeed. So any other comments or question? Yeah, you would love to see it. Thanks for sharing. All right. So what's been the best time of the year to visit Prague? Very good question. You can come anytime. You know why? Because we do tours all the time. No, but it's not about us, of course. When you come to Prague, it depends a bit what you would like to focus on. If you would like to see the city empty, well, of course, that's now a good moment, but also nothing is really open. But what I would recommend, if you want to see Prague in the quiet areas, so in the quiet times, it is usually very low in February and March, and also in November. But of course, it's also cold and ugly months here. What is beautiful, if you come to Prague in the springtime, this year we did not have really a spring. We had snowfall just a few weeks ago again. So, you know, it always happens still for us in April, but so it can be quite cold still. So now we have getting into summer very quickly. So, but normally May, April is a beautiful time because when there's a proper spring, it's beautiful. All the trees are blooming. You have the beautiful Baroque gardens on the castle side. So it's just awesome. And there's so much space when you are outside, you do not have to worry that Prague is full. So that's of course beautiful. Summer times can be quite a challenge because it can get really hot. And then especially in the old town, there's no wind really going, so it's very sticky there. So it's not so easy. Also, the hotel rooms are not always in the best, so it's quite warm in July and August. If you do not mind the heat, then of course you can come. It's quite crowded though. We have a lot of people coming from far away. Europeans like to go here in the area of October and also in this April-May time. So that's of course always like traveling around Easter, for example. So it's always very busy here. We have around 5.2 million people coming to Prague, kind of an average over the last year. But in 2019, we had a record of 8.6 million, which is really a lot. And to be honest, it's a lot because we also just have 1.2 million people living here. So therefore quite a lot. All right. So now we go along the riverside. So here was no wall. It was kind of a physical, it's kind of a natural wall that was the river. The river has two names. On this side where we are, it is called Vltava, because this was always the Czech side. On the other side, people used to call it, like Habsburgers back in the days, called it Moldau. So you might have heard about both names, and both names are still existing and used. So if you look to the dictionary, you'll find always this river with both names. And since we talked a bit about classical music, if you're interested in that, there's a very famous composition of this. The song is called Moldau of Bedřich Smetana. So he's quite famous. Bedřich Smetana did a very famous composition, which is quite old by now, but it's a beautiful song. So if you're interested to hear something very specific of Prague, the first part is not that famous, so it starts with a very nice melody, but the real good melody kicks in, I think, after half a minute. So that's when it really starts. It's beautiful. You hear that when you often come to Prague by plane, or when you come to Prague by train. So then they often play this song. So it might sound familiar. Good. Any other comments? Any other questions? Just checking if there's anything in the chat. And then we get to our last stop, which is the, if I can spell the song, of course. So it's called Moldau. So I put that directly into the chat so that you can see the title. So it's called Moldau, like the river. And the person who wrote it and did the composition is called Bedřich Smetana. So just to let you know, so that's very famous. And then we get to our last stop. All right, good. And then I can, of course, share some more insights. So anything you would like to know also around the tours, how we moved from in-person tours to online tours, how we get prepared now for the in-person tours, happy to share any insights, of course. So anytime. All right. Interesting, you find interesting symbols in Prague, and one that was kind of interesting for us in the group was always this one, because it's an original sign of an order of knights that dates back even the very early beginning, 12th century. So it's called the Knights with the Red Cross and the Red Star. So which is, there's not really a proper translation to English, to be honest. But there's that was a group that was an order of knights, the first one that was founded by a woman. And that goes back to the times of Agnieszka. So that dates back really old times, 12th and 13th century. When we talk about the knights, though, they were always famous because they were there for protecting of the city. So that was not a common knight. Knights were also known for not for charity, I can tell you, let's put it this way. But those ones were always. And therefore it's not a surprise that you might have heard about the Maltese, which is kind of a subgroup that came originally out of these knights that had their legend and were born over here. So the legend of the knights, and you still find the order of the knights here. We just do not know what they're really doing. Kind of a secret community still, but they have a museum. And they also own some of the buildings here, which are open for tourists. Good. So now we go to our last stop, to the Charles Bridge, but also to one of the heroes. I would love to introduce more in detail our not forgotten, but our famous king, the Charles IV. So I will share some more information about him. Just checking the chat if I missed anything else. Oh, yeah, good question. Thank you for the question. See, it's about where were the night watchmen also the lamplighters? Well, they did a lot of other duties also, anything that needs to be done. So we had also professional, or that was a profession later on, but it was also sometimes the night watchman. It's still a tradition today in the Christmas time. One of the colleagues on the other side, on the castle side, is always, or not always, but lighting the lanterns, but it's more for the tourists. So we try with our tours to bring back this tradition also a bit more, but still he's doing that. He's going on the Charles Bridge, where we get now, and then he's lighting some lanterns there. Most of the lanterns are gas lanterns, and some are even old from the beginning of the 19th century, so really old. So therefore quite exceptional. But yes, indeed, we had the lights, and night watchmen used to do any type of work. You have to imagine we would have more jobs. It was not only one. Often you find night watchmen being the same as like the gravedigger and sometimes the night watchman. I have some family history with that. I will share that with you later on with this documentation. And also they did take care of the garbage. They removed the dead animals from the streets. So anything the town councils, the officials of Prague, whatever needs to be done in the city, they appointed the people or the jobs of a lower reputation, like night watchmen, executioners, to take care of the ugly work. And this is what night watchmen did, taking care of garbage, throwing it into the river as mentioned, or the executioners taking care of the dead animals, and also lighting lanterns. So anything that was done in the dark or when the dark set in. Yeah, very good comment. Thanks for sharing or asking. And this person here is one of the most famous heroes of the Czech Republic. Well, for a good reason, to be honest. This one is another tongue breaker for you. Karel IV. So if you drank your 3 liters of beer by now, you might be able to say that by now. Karel IV. That means Charles IV. But it took me only 10 years to be able to say that as a German. Karel IV. So he was the one who came from the family of John the Blind, also known as John of Luxembourg. So quite famous. His father was the German-speaking part. His mother was the Czech-speaking part. He first went to Paris. There was a strong alliance. You have to imagine it was the French and German people always fighting against their biggest enemy, the Englishman, in something that is called the 100 Years of War. He went there to fight quite often. First, his father took him to France to study there. So were the nobles over there. So he could, when he returned, speak 4 languages fluently. And he could, as the first king here, read and write. No other king could do that before, just to let you know. So I just stop here for a moment to introduce him to you. Here you see him, how he's handing over the official first diploma at the Charles University that was also founded by him. He said that there's only one real enemy or friend who can fight the enemy of hunger, fear, pain, and war. And he called it education. In the 14th century already. So he knew about the power of education. Very different. The father, though, was a strong knight, John the Blind, and he was such a proud knight that despite his blindness he had in that time, he went into the battle. And of course he took his son, because he said, as a king, he needs to know how to fight battles. What he did not expect is that he would die, and his son would see him dying in the battle. So Charles IV had his lessons learned from the Battle of Crises, where they outnumbered Englishmen. But they had a famous invention there called longbows. To be exact, it was the Welsh people, not the English. And they could shoot arrows over a distance of 200 meters and further. They went even through the chainmail of the knights and also their armory, but also of the horses, who had also armor, of course. So in the end, they lost that battle, but he survived it. He got out of that quite quickly, and he survived because the the bodyguards took him out earlier from the father, because he knew since the father died, he's very important. He had his lessons learned. He did not want to fight anymore. And when he became the Roman emperor, instead of his weapons, he took his family members and married them to the enemies. And that's the way how he made peace in Europe. Very appreciated by the enemies. They got land, they got money, they got the family members to marry to. His family members didn't like it at all. They were all married away, but it brought peace. And it's known as the Golden Age in history, the first time of peace after 100 years of war. The Czech people have him on the 100 crowns note. So we still don't have euros here, you might know. We have still Czech crowns, but you find him on the 100 crowns notes, which is around something like $4. So that's a bit about him. And now we let the night watchman go over the bridge. And of course, there I would also share one more thing with you, with a nice view also on the castle, of course. And it's an old poem that is an homage to the night watchman. And then I have some more questions, some more answers if you have more questions, of course. So I think we are really good in time. But then if you still have the 5 minutes, I would be happy to share also with you this small documentary about this 5 minutes. What you see here, just to let you know, it is the place where we find another gate, which is the parallel, the opposite one from the Powder Gate where we started. So what we do in our tour, we go through the whole old town until the end. And then you would have the gates closed. In the past, you would have to pay for that, a fee, that you are allowed to cross the bridge. You even have to declare what type of business you used to do, at least until the 18th century. And then as of 19th century, it was opened and you do not have to pay any, since then you didn't have to pay anything. And here the night watchman always says goodbye. We always leave our groups here and then we go into the night over the bridge and enjoy, of course, the view. For the online version, we take you with me, of course. So just to show a bit with you what you can see from the bridge, of course, you see the river, but also you see interesting monuments on the castle side. So that's the area where night watchmen from this side were not allowed to walk. They had their own night watchmen for the nobles over there. So we were not even allowed to pass. So kind of interesting. The bridge was built by Charles IV, as mentioned, but he did not even cross it until it was finished because it took almost 50 years to finish that Charles Bridge. Also built by this architect, Peter Parler. And what you see in front of us is, of course, the castle. The castle, by the way, are all these kind of different buildings that are in light going all around the cathedral. The cathedral is known as the St. Veits Cathedral, very famous, also started to be built in the 14th century by Peter Parler, but they only finished that in the year 1922. So again, don't ask the Parler family to build a cathedral for you. It takes a while and also a bit of money. But of course, the castle is famous. In some parts you can go into it, but just a few. Most of the parts still belong to the Czech president, Miloš Zeman. That means we still have a president living and working there. I mean, living there, to be honest, not really working. But yes, so that's the castle, and of course it's beautiful. All right, so we get to the official end by now, and I would still invite you, if there are any other questions you have, anything you would like to know, any comments? All good. Then I have at last but not least, I have this poem for you, which dates back to the 14th century. So it was a bit boring, to be honest. That's why I couldn't resist. So therefore I changed it a bit. And it ends now in the 21st century. And it goes as the following. I just stop at the video for a moment when the light is in a better shape, when it's sharp. All right, so it goes as the following. Just let me drink a bit of dangerous water. Don't do that, please. I'll just do that now quickly. Good, so here's your poem. Now get rest, lay down to sleep. I pray the Lord your soul to keep. If you should die before you wake, I pray the Lord your soul to take. If you should live for other days, I pray the Lord to guide your ways. With a lantern and halberd in the dark, I keep you safe right here in Prague. May angels watch me through the night, protect me till the morning's light. Your night watchman of Prague is here. Enjoy yourselves and drink your beer. And write me a review, it's no spam. And follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much that you joined the online version of our tour. And I do hope that despite a bit of the dark history that you also had a bit of fun, of course. If you have still more questions, happy to answer them. And I can also stop the video over here. So to see if there's anyone who has some more questions. I see also some German speaking here in the chat. Yes, thank you so much for your comments there. Any other questions? Just checking if there's anything I missed. Oh, there's something about the land. And for those who would like still to see the small documentary, happy to share that if you still have the 5 minutes for that. It's really 5 minutes, it's not more. I see there are some comments. Ah, yeah, the statue reminds of the Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, da Vinci, yes, that's true. Yes, is there any modern part in the city or has it all remained in the state? Good question. We had quite some reconstruction, but more from the outside. They keep it in the same shape. You should know the old town areas and under the protection of the World UNESCO, so heritage of the World UNESCO. So therefore, it's very well preserved and also not really destroyed in war times. Actually, accidentally, 2 times Prague was bombed by the Allies. They have mistaken Prague with Dresden. That happened 2 times, but normally almost not at all destroyed in the war times. And of course, therefore, you find here almost everything very well preserved. But it's also quite in a disorder. You can get easily lost in Prague because it was built in the different centuries, because you have to imagine everyone wanted to live as close as possible to the king. Hence, everything got even pushed further and further to the riverside. So that means you can get easily lost in Prague. There's not really a system how the buildings were built. And therefore, they were built wherever was space in the different centuries. So just to let you know, it's kind of a mix all over the place. It's not one district, only a certain architecture style. All right, good. I see a lot of comments there. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I know it's a tricky thing to share that through video, so I hope we can do the in-person tour soon again, that we are also able to see each other. So whenever you come to Prague, please do not hesitate. You can always reach out to us. So happy to give you any recommendations, and you don't have to book a tour for that. So whenever you come to Prague, happy to help you. And please take note that that this is not expiring, this offer. So therefore, whenever you come, just let us know. If you want to know where to have food, where to stay, or when to come, as mentioned, so anytime, happy to help. And when I say we, it's our team. So therefore, happy to do that together with my team. I can also share with you in the chat box here the Instagram. So I can do that also, of course, so that you can also follow us. That is more for those who actually prefer for those people who prefer to stay connected. We of course post there some things, so happy to give you any comments. Good, so just checking and getting the video ready for those who want to see that small documentary, so happy to do that. So, good, I just would like to ask Katarina, so may I ask you, so is it possible to stop the screen sharing now? Is that possible before I share the last video? Because we just need to be careful with the last one. Is that possible?
Yes, we can stop it.
Thank you so much, because there we need to be really